Good afternoon. I'm Gary Jordan of NASA Public Affairs, and thank you for joining us here at NASA Johnson Space Center for the Expedition 47-48 Crew News Conference. I'm here with the crew, who is set to launch on March 18th, U.S. time, March 19th, Kazakhstan time, from the Baikonur Cosmodrome. Veteran NASA astronaut Jeff Williams and two Roscosmos cosmonauts, Alexey Ovchinin, and commander of the Soyuz TMA-20M spacecraft and flight engineer Oleg Skripochka. Guys, thanks for being here today.
Good to be here.
A little bit about our crew before we move on. Jeff has a total of 362 cumulative days in space, one on Space Shuttle Flight STS-101 on Atlantis, and 2 flights on the Soyuz spacecraft to the International Space Station for Expedition 13 and 21-22. He will take over as commander for Expedition 48. For Alexey, this will be his first space flight. He was an instructor pilot and an air flight commander before becoming a cosmonaut in 2006, finished his basic training in 2009. We're excited to see your flight. Oleg has 1 space flight on Expedition 25-26, accumulating 159 days in space during his 5-month stay on the International Space Station. So why don't we start with you, Jeff, and then we'll move on to the rest of the crew. Tell us a little bit about your training over these past couple months.
Well, we've been training actually for the last couple of years. As you know, preparing for this, the last couple of months have been focused on the mission specifics. Prior to that was the generic training, whether it be refresher training or the first time going through it. So the last couple of months have been focused on the actual specifics of the mission content. These guys were in Germany in December. I was in Japan for final training there in those respective places. And now we're here in Houston for 2 weeks as a Soyuz crew, getting our final systems updates, as well as some payload and experiment training, as well as taking some medical data to support some of the experiments that they will be doing on us. And then the ever-present preparation for emergencies. Emergency training is one of the big things that we do when we're together as a crew. After the 2-week period here in Houston, Alexey and Oleg will return to Russia. I will join them a couple weeks later, and then we'll get into our final training in Star City, just outside of Moscow, go through our final exams there, get signed off by the Russian Commission that we're ready for flight, and then we'll, of course, take our trip down to Baikonur and do the final preparations and leading up to the launch date. On the 18th, Houston time, as you said. So we're looking forward to that. We've had a great experience training together. Alexey and I were previously on a backup crew for the 1-year flight a year ago. Oleg was on the backup crew for this past September launch. And then when he completed that, we joined together as a crew preparing for this March launch. So it's been a very good experience for us, and we're looking forward to flying together here for a 6-month stay on the space station. With that, I'd like to give Alexey a chance to give his perspective on anticipation of a first flight. Before he does that, I will say that one of the things I'm looking forward to the most is watching him go through the experience of first launch and first time in weightlessness and then the first flight in space station. That's always one of the more enjoyable things to do if you've been there and done it before.
Это будет мой первый полет, как уже сказали. Я к нему готовлюсь уже более 9 лет. Очень хочу слетать. Очень бы хотелось, чтобы это был первый и не последний полет. Надеюсь, что все мои ожидания оправдаются, что мне очень понравится. Как Джефф уже сказал, мы вместе тренируемся уже 2 года. В России мы изучаем системы российского сегмента. Здесь, в Америке, изучаем системы, работу с ними по американскому сегменту. Также ездили в Германию, где проходили обучение по европейскому сегменту Международной космической станции, ну и в Японии по японскому сегменту. Я считаю, что наш экипаж достаточно подготовлен, что мы справимся со всеми поставленными задачами.
Well, this will be my first flight, and I have been getting ready for 9 years. And I'm really looking forward to this flight, and I'm hoping it will be my first but not last flight. And I'm hoping that all my hopes will be fulfilled and I will fulfill everybody's expectations. We have been training for 2 years, training on the Russian segment systems in Russia and on the US segment systems in the United States. And also we have been getting ready to work on the European part of the station, and we have been training in Germany for that. And in Japan, we have been training to be ready to work on the Japanese hardware. So the crew is completely ready.
Excellent. Now, Oleg, you had your space flight in
Oleg,
2010.
with-
How will you take that experience to this upcoming flight?
So as Jeff said, this is my second flight, should be my second flight. And in comparison with first flight, I see that there are many more numbers of scientific experiments that we should do on board from Russian side and from American side. And there are some experiments that the whole crew involved in. So I think it's a good sign for us. We will work as one team. We will not spend our time for nothing.
Excellent. We're excited to see your flight. And Jeff, I know that you mentioned that you'll be focusing on history for your communication on the International Space Station. We actually have some special guests with us today from the Houston History Alliance. We also have some special guests from the Emerge Employee Resource Group. They are the young professionals here. And also we have some interns and, of course, our media guests. So with that, we're going to start opening it up for questions. Just a reminder that if you call into the phone bridge, to please press *1 to ask a question and *2 to withdraw that question if it has been answered. And if you're following along on social media, we're using the hashtag #AskNASA. So why don't we start with some of the media that we have in the audience. If you'd like to start, please state your name and affiliation.
I'm Mark for Aviation Week and Space Technology. And I'll start with Jeff, if that's all right. There's so much interest in furthering the development of the station for a commercial crew. I know it's a little bit fluid, but can you kind of describe what you're prepared to do in terms of furthering work on the outside and maybe inside to get the first and maybe further than that, first docking module or maybe more applied during your time?
Of course, the primary tasks that we have in the plan right now, and the date is a little bit fluid, I think, but it will be the arrival of the first docking adapter for commercial crew, which we will install on the front end of the space station on PMA-1. And that will involve one EVA to integrate it, to install it and then integrate it, and so that we can do the checkout of it to prepare then for the first launch of a commercial crew vehicle, which of course will happen after our expedition. But that's the major event that we have on our plate during our stay there currently in the plan to support commercial crew. Of course, that's a significant milestone as we all anticipate the first flight and subsequent flights of commercial crew vehicles. According to the current plan from the two companies, which will significantly expand the capability that we have for access to low Earth orbit and specifically the space station. Sometimes we tend to hear that the impression out there is that we're dependent on the Russian side for access, and certainly there's some truth in that, but I like to put it in a little bit different way, in that the Russian side has been great partners with us on the ISS program. And we chose to retire the shuttle, and there was rationale to do that, and it's taken some time to develop the next generation of vehicles to get there. So that has resulted in a gap. But the Soyuz, in terms of the space station program, has been in the program since the beginning. So the Russians have, as I said, been very good partners in that to step up to the plate to fill the gap that we didn't anticipate in the beginning. Also, I would say that when we do begin flying commercial crew vehicles, that it's not going to be now where the U.S. side is doing one thing and the Russian side is doing another. The two vehicles, or two types of vehicles, maybe three vehicles, will complement one another to sustain the ISS program out to the end of its life. I think it's probably fair to say, to assume that there will continue to be one U.S. crew member on every Soyuz and one Russian cosmonaut on every U.S. commercial vehicle after that. And from an operational point of view, we need to do that for the case when we, as a contingency, we need to go down to one one vehicle crew on board space station. In other words, 3 or 4 people. We have to have the expertise required for the systems on both ends of the space station.
Good question. Any more from the media? Yes, sir.
Robert Perlman with CollectSpace.com. For Jeff, I understand that while you're on board, the beam inflatable module will be expanded. Can you describe the process from the crew side of what you will do to monitor that process, as well as entering it and how often you'll have access to that module?
Yeah, we're very excited, anticipating the beam coming up on SpaceX and deploying it as an experiment. That's one of the major categories of utilization of the space station, is the development of new technologies, and in a sense opening up the door to commercial ventures in space, and beam represents both of those aspects. So it'll come up on SpaceX, it'll be removed from the SpaceX vehicle and berthed to the Tranquility, the Node 3 aft berthing port. And it will sit there for a time. That operation obviously will occur when SpaceX is berthed to the space station. The actual deployment of beam, I think, according to the current plan, will be after that SpaceX vehicle departs and returns to Earth. But beam is a technology demonstration which does just what you alluded to. It's an inflatable module, so its volume is smaller than when it launches than when it's utilized in space. So it takes less room, and that technology has some great promise for the launching of future spacecraft on rockets with smaller volume, and then expanding it to a full volume to be able to utilize those volumes in different ways on future spacecraft. So basically, after SpaceX leaves and we get to the time in the plan where we're going to deploy beam, it will be deployed with an internal mechanical structure out to its full volume. There will be vacuum on the inside, there's vacuum on the outside, so that deployment physically can occur. And then after that, it will be pressurized with air tanks that are inherent internal to the beam module itself. After it's pressurized, we will equalize the pressure between the station and beam, ingress, install some sensors for the data collection for the time that it's there. And then the nominal configuration, though, will be hatches closed, although there will be air transfer, ventilation between beam and the space station. The hatches will nominally be closed, and then it will sit there for its period of time. The data will be collected, and we'll see how the performance of that new technology turns out to be.
Yes, sir.
Hi, Ed Mayberry with KUHF Radio here in Houston. I wanted to ask each of you what your specific jobs will be in this mission. And with the docking apparatus being part of the mission, will any of you be doing spacewalks?
I will say that each of us are trained in many aspects of space station operations. So there will be a common set of things that we're all doing based on how we're scheduled for day to day. So the operation of the space station, some of the maintenance of the space station, some of the execution of routine activities, will all be responsible for that. Of course, we have some specialty areas. I will be responsible, for example, all of the systems on the U.S. segment, whereas Alexey and Oleg will have greater responsibility on the Russian segment, because that's where we have specialized in those areas. So that's a general answer. As Gary mentioned in the beginning, I will take over command for Expedition 48 from Tim Kopra. And for 47, of course, we'll be augmenting Tim Kopra, Tim Peake, and Yuri Malenchiko, who are currently on board. Tim Kopra will be the commander, so that'll be his responsibility, and then he'll hand it over to me for Expedition 48. In terms of the docking adapter, it depends upon when that comes, whether it arrives during Expedition 47 or 48. There will be, as I said, one spacewalk associated with the integration of that docking adapter, and it will be a combination of a couple of us in the U.S. segment. It hasn't been determined who will be on that spacewalk, but it will be, if it's in 47, it'll be two of the three of us, Tim Kopra, Tim Peake, or myself. If it's during 48, it will be two of the three of Kate, Rubens, Takuya, from JAXA, and or myself. So that's yet to be determined.
So, yes, sir.
2 weeks before the end of your scheduled expedition, you're supposed to, or you're expected to pass Kelly's 520-day cumulative time on for most experienced astronaut. Does this represent a change or relaxation of NASA policy regarding cumulative exposure to radiation for long-duration missions?
No, it doesn't represent a change at all. We have standards that have been applied, and I haven't followed the history of those things, but they haven't been changed for this. They were looked at a little bit closer for the one-year flight, and as you know, I backed up Scott, and he and I met the requirements to be able to execute the one-year mission without exceeding our lifetime limits. And of course, so now with the 6-month flight for myself, and accumulating the days that it will, I still do not exceed the lifetime issue. So no changes at all.
Excellent. Megan, do we have any questions on social media?
Yes. We have a question from Peter Robinson on the International Space Station Facebook page. Will you be taking some of your own personal belongings to the station, and what will you be doing on your off-duty days, for any of you?
Oleg, you want to start?
Every Cosmonaut astronaut can take his own things with him, but the amount is strongly limited. As far as I know, it's about 1 kilo per person I can take on board. Usually it's some family photos or some pictures, some souvenirs maybe, some stuff like this.
Alexey, any items that you're going to be bringing?
Да, я тоже, как и Олег, возьму фотографии родных, близких. Также со мной на борту будет игрушка, которую на время полета мне даст моя дочь с собой. Эта игрушка изначально будет индикатором невесомости, а потом она со мной будет полгода, будет напоминать о родных и близких. После полета я ее верну дочке.
Yes, just like Oleg, I'm going to take photographs of my relatives and loved ones. Plus, I will take a toy taken from my daughter, and it will serve at first as an indicator of 0G, and later it will serve as a reminder of my daughter, and when I come home, I will return it to her.
Amazing. Megan, any more social media questions?
Yes. We have one on Twitter from Laura Austin. Who would you credit on having the greatest influence on you being what you're doing and where you're doing it?
Well, let's see. There's a short list for me. Certainly my father inspired me growing up. He was a school teacher. He taught history. Later, when I went through high school, he was a guidance counselor. He opened me up to the world of military opportunities and the academies specifically, and I ended up going to the military academy at West Point. So that I would certainly include him on that list. I had a 6th grade science teacher who significantly influenced me during those years, 6th and 7th grade, to inspire me in science. So I would also include him, and there's several others as well.
Alexey, any idols or any inspirations?
Меня вдохновили стать космонавтом, наверное, российские космонавты. Еще будучи ребенком, смотря телевизор, видя газеты, каждый старт экипажа или посадка освещалась очень ярко. Это была новость номер один. И видя этих людей, мне стало интересно, и я решил, что я стану космонавтом. Я это решил в возрасте, наверное, 7-8 лет.
Well, what prompted me to become a cosmonaut, I think it was other Russian cosmonauts, because during every launch and landing, there was wide coverage on Russian TV and newspapers, and it was presented in such a way that I really wanted to become a cosmonaut. And I made my decision when I was about 7 or 8 years old.
Very cool. Well, Jeff, with your father being a history teacher, I think we'll turn it over to the Houston History Alliance. I'm sure you guys have some great questions.
Who's first?
This man in the back.
I have a question. I'm Debbie Harwell. I'm on the board for the Houston History Alliance, and I'm the managing editor of Houston History Magazine. In 2008, we did an issue with NASA on the history of the first 20 years of the space program, and Chris Kraft said at that time that he thought that Apollo 8 was the most significant mission that NASA had done, and I was just curious to know what you think was the most significant mission and why.
Well, I suppose it would depend upon how you approach that question and how you define the significance. Obviously, I think that was a significant mission. I mean, they added objectives to that mission that were not envisioned initially. What was envisioned initially to be accomplished over, I think, several missions, as I recall, they put together in one mission. That was actually going to the moon and orbiting the moon and all of that, as you know better than I do, probably. The most significant mission, I think, from a world's perspective point of view, from a historic perspective, would be Apollo 11. That's when the whole world was watching. Ironically, shortly after that, much of the world stopped paying attention. And we know that as well, too. And that's a lesson in history in itself. There were some motivations, I think, that focused the world on Apollo 11, the moon landing, and those motivations went away afterwards. So, I mean, I could go on and on about that, but I'll leave it at that so we can get to the next question.
Any more from in the back? Yes.
Hi, Carolyn Summers from the International Science. What's the toy you're taking for your daughter, and will you be videotaping it so we can enjoy how it performs?
Игрушка уже определена давно. У меня дочке 8,5 лет. Она очень любит игрушки сову, игрушку в виде совы. У нас, наверное, целая коллекция этих сов. Вот одна из них, не очень большая, будет со мной эти полгода.
My daughter is 8.5 years old right now, and she is very fond of toys in the shape of owls. So we have a whole collection of owls, and I will be taking one of them.
And Yana, who is her name, is very enthusiastic about all of that. Every time I've been to their apartment, she spends some time showing me all of her new items.
Yes, sir.
Eddie Weller from San Jacinto College, the Houston History Alliance. I grew up and remember Apollo 11 as a kid, just couldn't wait, had pictures of astronauts on the wall, and that impacted me enormously. I'm curious, in your career at NASA, what do you think has been the greatest impact for the future generations, for those you see coming up?
Well, it has just worked out in my career that, and the assignments that I've gotten, that it's been focused on space station. And one of the reasons that I want to maybe delve into the historic aspect of it, and it won't be a big focus on history. What I want to try to do is remind the world of the significance of the history of the space station, when it was first thought about, which goes way back, decades back, right? And then when it was finally announced in 1984 as Space Station Freedom, and then when it morphed in the early 90s from Space Station Freedom, which by the way was canceled prior to ISS, and then it became the International Space Station with a new partnership of Russia, and then going through the technical challenges of developing the operations during phase one, the Shuttle Mir program, so that we would learn how to work with each other's systems and get to know one another to prepare us for the ISS, and then building the ISS over many years with many challenges, to include the consequences of the Columbia accident and the loss of that crew, and the partnership working together to do all of that and to assemble this. To me, it's fair to argue that the greatest achievement of the space station program is the space station itself. And that's what I want to try to, in some way, maybe enrich the awareness of the public. Not so much because of the history, but because of what that history enables us to do in the future.
Way in the back, yes.
Hi, my name is Amy Rogers. I'm with the 1940 Air Terminal Museum over at William P. Hobby Airport, where our focus is on aviation and aerospace history. A major part of our mission is to educate and inspire the next generation of aviators and aerospace professionals. So we have found that by having all of the history available in the museum hasn't always been enough. And so we've been finding ways to reach out to people like yourself to come out and speak to the children, and we found that that's been the most impactful. Would you agree that the best way to really inspire the next generation is have them hear the history, but from the mouths of the individuals that have actually lived it and are doing it now?
Certainly, I agree that that is an inspiring experience, and I think we can all relate to that when we grew up, each of us here in the room, when we grew up, hearing the accounts from people that were involved in some endeavor. That was an inspiration. I bet everybody in here can go back and remember the significance of that in our each individual life. So certainly, and we all try to do it. I know in Russia, the cosmonauts also speak often to children or to young people, universities or whatnot. Oleg went to Bauman University in Moscow. I have spoken there with a group of astronauts and cosmonauts in the past, so certainly that's an important thing to do. Unfortunately, it's very difficult to touch all those people we'd like to touch in that personal way.
I know you guys have a million questions, but why don't we move on to our Emerge group and the interns. Any questions from this side?
I have a question. My name is Isha Patel, and thank you so much for being here. As you mentioned earlier, a lot of your crew time is dedicated to utilization. Are there any science projects you guys are most looking forward to?
Alexey, why don't you talk about fluid shifts? Not that you're looking forward to it, but it is an interesting experiment.
Ну, во-первых, первое, что я жду, это своего первого космического полета. Это, наверное, самая главная вещь, которую я жду в ближайшее время.
Well, the first thing that I am really anticipating is my first space flight.
Во время нашего космического полета мы будем выполнять различные эксперименты. Один из экспериментов, который мы будем выполнять вместе с Джеффом, это будет эксперимент Fluid Shift.
And during our flight, we are going to be performing several experiments. And one of them I'm going to be performing with Jeff, and this is Fluid Shifts experiment.
Это эксперимент, который направлен на изучение организма человека. Значит, этот эксперимент проводится совместно российской, американской стороной.
And this is an experiment that is directed to study the human body, and both the US and Russian sides are taking part in it.
Этот эксперимент начался недавно, И сейчас главная задача – это сбор статистического материала.
And this experiment was just recently started, and its main purpose is to gather data.
Я надеюсь, что результаты этого эксперимента в будущем позволят ученым, врачам сделать выводы, которые позволят путешествовать космонавтам, астронавтам в длительных космических полетах к дальним планетам, на астероиды и возвращаться оттуда в хорошей физической форме.
And it is to be hoped that the results of this experiment will allow the medical specialists to draw conclusions that will be beneficial for application to long-term space flights to distant planets and asteroids, and they will allow astronauts to return to Earth without any physical or other impacts to their body.
Основная цель этого эксперимента – это исследование влияния факторов космического полета на организм человека.
So the main thrust of this experiment is to study the impact of spaceflight on human body.
Excellent. Any more questions from the media that we have here? Yes, sir.
Mark from Aviation Week in Space Technology, and this is for the Cosmonauts. Will there be any prep work for the multi-purpose laboratory module that, as far as I know, is still to go to the space station at some point for the Russian part?
Пока такой конкретной подготовки нет, но я очень надеюсь, что она скоро начнется, потому что в ближайший год-два планируется запуск этого модуля к Международной космической станции.
So far, there is no specific preparation for the MPLM, but I'm really hoping that in a year or two, we will have the preparation started because we are expecting this module on the station.
Very good. Any more? Yes, sir.
Hi, Ed with KUHF again. Jeff, you talked about looking forward to seeing a crew member make the first launch, go through that experience. You've been through 4. Can you talk a little about, compare the first, second, and third launch, fourth launch that you've been through?
Well, the first launch, of course, was on the space shuttle for me, and it was everything I had hoped for and more, and I still remember it as if it was yesterday. I was the only rookie on that crew, so everybody else had given me lots of advice and tips, and they were available to answer my questions as we trained for that for a better part of a couple of years. And it was just a great experience. But it was 10 days long in the flight, so it was one of those cases where you landed and then you turned around and you say, what just happened to me? Because it went so fast. The second launch was my first one on a Soyuz. So it was a different vehicle, completely different environment. Только по-русски was only in Russian language, so it was had that very historic operation in Kazakhstan. Very unique. And even to this day, I'm still overwhelmed with the irony of doing what we're doing and have it done then. Growing up in my early career as a U.S. Army officer in the Fulda Gap, in the height of the Cold War. And now, we've been working as partners and working well as partners for many years. So the Soyuz was a different vehicle, but it's a rocket, and both of them are rockets, but instead of 7 people and 30 or 40,000 pounds of payload, we're 3 people and a few hundred pounds of payload, and I characterize it as triplets in a womb in the Soyuz. So it was a very good experience as well. The last flight was, of course, a repeat of that. And when you repeat something, you have the advantage to you're not surprised by things, so you're able to observe and take in more details of the experience. And I think that was my experience with the last Soyuz flight. On that crew, even though I was the American, I was the experienced Soyuz crew member. So there were some rewards along with that to help the other guys get through the experience. And so I look forward to this coming one along those lines of having done it before, being able to observe and take in a few more details to be able to characterize the experience in a fuller way.
Yes, sir.
Rob from flexbase.com again. For Oleg, you're flying on the last TMA-M class Soyuz, but you and your crew were, I think, originally scheduled for the first MS vehicle. I wonder if you could share what some of the differences between this retiring class of Soyuz and what the next one brings, and how that changed in your training.
Ну, разница в том, ну, так получилось, что мой первый полет был на первом корабле серии ТМА-М. И разница с предыдущей версией была существенная, поскольку стоял более мощный компьютер, и система управления, она полностью меняла идеологию работы экипажа в корабле.
Yes, there is a difference, and my first flight was on Soyuz TMA-M, and the main difference is in a more powerful computer, which completely changes the crew actions.
Отличие Союза МС от Союза ТМА-М в том, что там меняются оконечные истории, то есть начинает использоваться спутниковая навигация и более совершенные системы сближения.
So the difference between Soyuz MS and Soyuz TMA-M is in the satellite navigation system and the prox ops.
Да.
Okay, one more from the
И
media.
также меняется состав двигателей на корабле.
And also the thrusters. There are changes in the thrusters on the Soyuz.
Yes, sir.
Going to American Space. Related to Robert's question about Soyuz MS as well, would you be able to expand on some of the delays that caused, some of the reasons for the delay of the launch of Soyuz MS?
Насколько я знаю, проблема, скажем, в сертификации совместной работы нового корабля и ракетоносителя. То есть это больше формальная работа, которая сейчас проводится.
Well, as far as I understand, the delay was due to paperwork to certify the integration of the launch vehicle and the Soyuz vehicle.
Of course, that was a result of the Progress rocket failure last April.
Да, и также по требованиям безопасности необходимо, чтобы два прогресса новой модификации стартовали и пристыковали станции успешно перед полетом первого пилотируемого Союза МС.
Yes, and also there is a requirement that there are two successful Progress launches and dockings, the Progresses with a new modification. And after that you can have a flight of Soyuz MS.
Изначально старт первого Союза МС, пилотируемого, планировался на март месяц. Наш экипаж планировался в полет на новом корабле, но в связи с некоторыми передвижками, изменениями, сейчас пока старт первого пилотируемого Союза МС переносится на конец мая, начало июня.
And initially our crew was planned to launch on the new Soyuz in March, but now the Soyuz MS launch was delayed to the end of May or to start of June. So that's when we will have the first piloted Soyuz vehicle, Soyuz MS launch.
The good news for these guys especially is, you asked about training. Moving off the MS back in the TMA-M reduced the training for them, so they were able to have a little vacation before coming to Houston this time.
There is more vacation.
In the meantime, Megan, any social media questions?
We have one from Karen on Twitter. Which space station feature or piece of equipment are you most looking forward to using?
Well, there's a lot of good equipment on the space station. I'll speak personally from a personal point of view. One of my hobbies up there in the little free time that we are able to squeeze in is taking pictures of the Earth, and we have new photography equipment up there since I left last. So I look forward to using that new still photography and video equipment.
Alexey and Oleg?
Я думаю, что, наверное, нет такого оборудования. Возможно, во время полета появится, я тогда дам знать позже.
So far, I don't have such a piece of hardware that I'm really looking forward to use, but as soon as I know, I will let you know.
And as Jeff said, the most interesting pastime on the station is Earth observing for every crew member. So, as far as I know, there are some новые объективы, более мощные для фотоаппарата. Можно будет делать более совершенные фотоснимки.
Well, I know that new lenses have been delivered for cameras, and I'm looking forward to this experience of taking pictures with the new lenses.
And some of the astronaut photography is some of the most beautiful things we see from the International Space Station, for sure. Any more social media questions?
From Michael on Twitter, how do you listen to music on the space station? Do you plan to bring your own music?
We each have the opportunity to select music pre-flight and put it on a device where portable device on board. So that'll fly up with us on Soyuz. So we'll have it on board. We also have opportunity, if we have requests while we're up there, to get other music as well as other entertainment uplinked to us. So we're well supported along those lines.
Также на борту находится специальный сервер, в котором тоже загружено очень много фильмов, музыки, очень много различной музыки. Можно слушать любые стили, направления, кому что нравится.
Also, we have a special server on board, which is loaded with movies and different kinds of music, so we can choose whatever we want.
Okay, let's pass it on to the Houston History Alliance. I'm sure you guys have more questions. Yes, ma'am.
I'm Cecilia Mother of the Houston History Alliance. So, a generation before all of you, the space people involved with the space program with your respective space programs were really focused on competition. And within your careers, you've seen it transition from competition to collaboration. I'd like to hear about what that transition has been like for you throughout your career.
In terms of the partnership, you're going all the way back to the space race of the 60s, right? Yeah, obviously that was driven by the geopolitics at the time and the circumstances that had been set up with in the Cold War and all that, and that's that chapter of history. Actually, you can go all the way back to the mid-70s, and even during the Apollo moon missions was envisioned, had been proposed a joint mission with at the time, Soviet Union with Apollo Soyuz, and that was very successful. And it was very significant also from a world's point of view. In fact, I was in Moscow in July for the 40th anniversary of Apollo Soyuz, or as it's referred to over there, Soyuz Apollo. And it was big news in Russia. In fact, I'd like to tell the story when I was departing Russia in July, going through the Russian customs passport control. On our official passport, we have a little NASA sticker. And the passport agent in Russian asked me, were you here for Soyuz Apollo anniversary? So it was in the news. Everybody was aware of it. So that gives you an idea of the perspective of the public, particularly in Russia. and we get the same kind of support in our experience in the International Space Station. So obviously we all think, and you've heard this from crew members before, we hope that the International Space Station can serve as an example to the world to temper some of the other geopolitical stresses and conflicts and whatnot that go on in different degrees in history, and help set an example to the world to cooperate as opposed to causing conflict.
Well, you brought up a little bit of that when you were discussing, talking about transition within your career, starting at West Point and being an Army officer and then going on to the space program. I mean, that must have been, for you, a really interesting cultural change for you.
Of course, it was very interesting, and like I said earlier, I'm still overwhelmed with the irony of history of personally being able to experience that. And I will always say it's much better this way than the previous way, right? We'd rather be making efforts together in a constructive way rather than efforts against one another that's potentially not constructive.
Excellent. And it sounds like we have some callers in on the phone bridge. Michael Casey from FoxNews.com, you're on. Might have been disconnected. Do we have another caller on the phone bridge? Okay. Houston History Alliance. Yes, ma'am.
The International Space Station represents international cooperation. Do you see this cooperation continuing, and maybe even some of the components of the space station design continuing with Russia and the U.S. going, say, to the moon or to Mars or to an asteroid?
Certainly, I think it's highly probable that future programs will use the experience and the example of the International Space Station to build on. And there's several reasons for that. Obviously, there's a technology that developed for the space station, and now in the utilization of the space station, proven out to support future exploration. And there's continuous dialogue going on among the partnership, and there's dialogue even beyond the partnership with other nations, to look at the potential possible partnership and future endeavors. If you go back and look at history again, and you look at the moon race, those were single nations, right? And as soon as Apollo 11 happened, as I alluded to earlier, the support kind of diminished rapidly. So there was the geopolitical circumstances driving that. This largely symbolic victory was won, and so the technical objectives weren't there. To sustain, well, I'll back up a little bit, and I'll give you a personal viewpoint based on my experience of working through the space station. I believe if we were not partners with Russia specifically in the International Space Station, neither of our countries would be flying people in space today. That's my personal belief. And if you examine the history, it's very logical to come to that conclusion. That being said, it's very likely that future endeavors, especially big endeavors, whether it be going back to the moon or cislunar, as we like to call it, in the lunar system of different potential mission profiles. And of course, Mars is always out there, right? We're always talking about Mars or even other destinations. If you look at the scope of doing that, and you look at the history, as I described, I can't imagine ever doing that to completion outside of an international partnership.
Excellent. Yes, ma'am.
I'm part of the Young Professionals Resource Group here on site, and a couple of our friends and members of our employee resource group are applying to be astronauts, and I was wondering if you had any tips for them as they apply and then go through the interview process.
Keep working hard at what you're doing, and keep persevering with that goal. Keep doing the best job you can at what you're doing. Continue to seek education opportunities as you get them. And then keep applying and persevere. Don't get distracted with the application process. Don't get disappointed if you fail to get selected once or twice, or in my case, multiple times over 10 years. Just keep working at it. And if and when the door opens, you won't know why it opened anyway, because none of us do. None of us know why we got the opportunity, but I'm very grateful for it. So keep doing what you're doing.
Yes, sir.
I got a question for Oleg. With the Soyuz, it's a workhorse vehicle of human space flight, but because it is so automated now, what's the best part about flying it? What are you going to have the most fun at doing? And that's really a question for the kids that are watching this or on Facebook. So what's the best part about flying it? Where are you going to have the most fun?
Most fun? I can say my impressions from my first flight. The most fun when we launched, I felt about 20 billion horses behind my back for 10 minutes. Yeah. And when launch vehicle stopped working, we were put on orbit, and I felt real 0G, and I completely understood that this is conditions I will spend next half a year. So it was very uncommon for me when I first time looked at the window and I saw round Earth, black sky, and stars above them. I understood I really in space. Was really exciting for me. But it was a very short period because crew has a lot of things to do after just launching. But the first impression was the strongest.
Excellent.
I would like to ask Oleg to complete that question, just since you asked fun on Soyuz, to describe your landing 6 months later.
This was the final exciting part of us because we landed March 16, was real strong wind, real winter conditions, как метель была.
Yeah.
Soft landing.
So,
yeah, real wind. We landed on the ground, and then we were followed by parachute for 100 meters about. So, and we are rotating inside capsule. Yeah. I didn't feel well. Yeah, I just meant I didn't feel well when I was in the gravity after being in 0G conditions after a long period when we was just going down in air. But after landing, we are rotated for 100 meters just to complete this feeling.
Yes, sir.
That we call soft landing.
Hi, Alex Rubin, Biomedical Flight Controller. I have a question for Jeff, actually. With the recent federal budget passing and NASA receiving more money than they actually requested, do you think that this indicates a new interest in science and technology? And how do you think it will affect NASA operations going forward?
I don't know exactly what it indicates. However, I think it's great news, especially as I recall, and I haven't read a lot of details on it, but as far as I know, it had to do with the development of future capability, right, beyond the space station, and maybe investing in the systems that are required to support human life in space, and whether that be proven out on the space station or it be developed for the launch in a different spacecraft, that's good news. That's one of the primary achievements, I think, of the space station program is actually developing the technology, launching it, operating it, having it break, having it not work the way designed, and then responding to it and adjusting things and improving it, and then learning from maybe design flaws to redesign things. So that element of the just released budget is a very good news from that perspective.
We have time for about one more. Yes, sir.
Ethan O'Donnell, Houston History Magazine. I'm also a Chinese Studies major at the University of Houston, and I wanted to ask you, Jeff, regarding something like the Chinese exclusion policy, how have such policies helped or hindered the nation's space exploration efforts?
I don't know if I can answer that question. I know that there's been some dialogue going on, at least from a technology viewpoint or programmatic viewpoint. Certainly, as I said before, future programs are very likely to be in an international context. What that means in direct regard to China, I'm not sure. I can't really speak to.
Okay. Well, I think that's about all the time that we have. We got some great questions today, so I'd like to thank everybody for their questions here in the room and on social media. I'd like to thank our guests for joining us today, the Houston History Alliance, the Emerge Group, our interns, and of course our media. And finally, thanks to the Expedition 4748 crew, Jeff Williams, Alexey, Ovchinin, and Oleg Skripochka. Guys, thanks for being with us. With that, if the crew did not get to answer your question on social media, don't worry. We'll still be taking questions throughout the rest of the day. That's still the hashtag AskNASA. In the meantime, you can follow updates on social media. You can go to our International Space Station web pages on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. You can also follow Jeff. His handle is AstroJeff on Twitter. And you can go to our website, www.nasa.gov/station. So we're looking forward to the crew's launch on March 18th U.S. time, March 19th Kazakhstan time. Good luck, guys, and thank you.
Thank you, Gary.